Most critics, I know, can trace their careers back to one film, a singular cinematic sensation that forever altered the course of their destinies. Mine would be the last Godzilla movie an American studio dared to produce. If I were Spider-Man, that movie would be my dead uncle. Or my radioactive spider. Yeah, that's more appropriate. One of these days I'll review it, and the walls of my brain will collapse into a singularity of infinite mass and infinite density, triggering another Big Bang, I guess. Or I'll just start speaking in tongues, like I've just met Johnny Carcosa. Nagai Fatagan Ehukun Ekrailech. My G-fan colleagues are currently roasting Roland Emmerich's film over an open flame. Again. And they won't stop until its ashes are scattered to the four winds. If you want more of that, let your fingers do the walking. But now it's time for Gareth Edwards' film to split the fan base into warring camps. And I personally can't wait for Godzilla's ultimate owners at Toho Studios to capitalize on this again by releasing another crappy remake of a popular film from the 60s. Or two. Or three. Certainly worked for him last time. Ah well. If this film is meant to stand for Godzilla's Diamond Anniversary, I'm pleased to report the results are not bad. I'd even hesitantly call them good, despite serious reservations. Before it came out, I was worried that this film would suck outright. Now that it's come out, I'm worried that all 1998 taught Hollywood is that Godzilla can't carry a film by himself. He must fight another monster, because that's what people who don't watch Godzilla movies think when they think of a Godzilla movie, in the vaguest, most platonic terms. Here's the thing. Americans, and Brits, and the Germans, or hell, Gaijin in general, have a fundamentally different relationship to Godzilla than his countrymen and women. We think of him, when we think of him at all, as a plus-sized version of our superheroes. There's a very good reason for this. Giant heroes are thick as thieves in Japan, and their rise through popular culture paralleled Godzilla's own. Utilizing special effects techniques that Godzilla's co-creator, Eiji Tsuburaya, developed for that first film all the way back in 1954. Here we are, 60 years later, and Toho has once again loaned out its most bankable international star to an American company, who proceeded to put him in a Versus movie, despite his name being the only one in the title. This formula, as a lot of my non-G-fan colleagues have discovered this week, favors the antagonist monster. It's usually introduced first, coded as an existential threat to all humanity, on par with the next Michael Bay Transformers film, and gets by far the most amount of screen time. The presence of another monster in this film was supposed to be a surprise twist in the J.J. Abrams mold, and just like those, it was spoiled by the marketing department several months ago, probably on purpose. As 26th entries in franchises go, this one's better than a lot of them, and worse than several others. Kaiju films are as formulaic as anything else, and in no way more so than their human characters. After years of dedicated research, I've identified 5 major archetypes, the major arcana, if you will, and with 4 of them running around eating up screen time, Godzilla 2014 almost has a straight flush. We get a pair of scientists, a working-class hero, a military mifwick, usually a general, but this one's an admiral, and a chick, the most malleable of major arcana. She could technically count as a wild card. Over the course of the franchise, we've had military chicks, scientist chicks, psychic chicks, chicks possessed by ancient alien princesses, and hell, even working-class hero chicks.
Alright, hey, I don't need this. I don't need this working-class hero crap.
Oh, don't worry, Hooper, there's no working class in this country anymore. Just poor people. So, like many a poor person, our working-class hero is in the Navy.
In the Navy, yes, you can sail the 7 seas. In the Navy, yes, you can put your mind at ease. In the Navy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that too on the nose? Well, how about this? Working-class hero is an explosive ordnance disposal tech, right? So early on, he drops this really awkward line about how, I don't drop the bombs, I just dispose of them. And the only reason that is there is so pinko commie liberals like me don't ride this movie too hard for its glorification of the military. As if we're too stupid to know dropping the bombs and getting rid of them aren't two sides of the same fucking coin. All this movie's missing is a reporter. But considering the media's ubiquitous presence, I guess no one felt the need to personify it anymore. It's become a platonic ideal all its own, like the Hollywood film critics talk about. Or maybe Gareth Edwards just didn't want to repeat himself too much. Plus, with not one but two scientists, we're already pretty crowded as is. Number one is a nuclear power plant technician, and basically a competent Homer Simpson. Despite being named Joe, I'm just gonna go ahead and call him Bryan Cranston. After an earthquake hits his plant in a 1999 set prologue, killing his wife, Bryan Cranston devotes the next 15 years to proving that earthquake was actually something else. Considering the title of this film, we know he's right. It was actually a giant prehistoric radiation-eating insect that burrowed its way into his workplace so it could have enough food to pupate. Metamorphosis is hard on a motherfucker. Just ask Gregor Samsa.
What's the question?
Is this gonna be a stand-up fight, sir, or another bug hunt?
Actually, this could be a deliberate harkening back to the giant bug films in the 1950s. Godzilla's American cousins. Or it could be someone just asked their inner anthropocentrist, what's creepier than giant reptiles? Giant insects, of course. Wouldn't be the first time that answer's come up in the franchise. Like most kaiju fans, Bryan Cranston's obsession has alienated the hell out of his nearest and dearest, including his son, Ford, who grew up into Aaron,
I'm kick-ass. Look me up.
Taylor Johnson during that transition. I kept calling him Ford Prefect in my head, A, because I really want to read Godzilla's entry in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's probably something short and sweet, like mostly harmful. And B, because at least that Ford was interesting. This one's as boring as the TV shows Aaron Johnson used to star in before Matt Vaughn snapped him up. It's not all his fault. This dude can act. I've seen it. This is a director problem. And a script problem. The one word you'll hear over and over again about Johnson's character, including here, is generic. And that's probably on purpose. Or maybe it's because the guy who gets story credit on this also put his name on all 3 and counting Expendables films. It's a shame because Ford is our major point of view character, and the film keeps insisting that we'll buy Godzilla like it. Johnson almost justifies his prominence here. When he's working off a good actor, like Cranston or Ken Watanabe, it's like someone shining a full spectrum lamp on Swamp Thing. Dude just comes alive. But when he's surrounded by other dudes in combat fatigues, or worse, nothing but green screen, he almost disappears. And guess where he spends most of his time? Speaking of disappearing acts, all you Breaking Bad fans are gonna be pissed. Bryan Cranston's really only in this movie to justify your ticket purchase. And to gin up sympathies, the film hopes against hope that you'll transfer onto Ford. And the rest of the film is Ford Not Prefect's quest to save his incredibly hot wife and prop son back in San Francisco. No points for guessing which city's going to get trashed during the climax. They spoiled that on the poster. And thank God it's not New York again. Because how does one stop giant prehistoric EMP-spitting insects? Well, how about a giant prehistoric fire-breathing reptile? Certain people, played by established actors who could have easily carried this film all by themselves, have been tracking one of those since the 1950s. And what the fuck is the point of getting Ken Watanabe to star in your movie if all he's gonna do is stand around and tell the audience how they should feel about shit? But that's not important. What's important is that the power of family values compels every military operation in this film to bend over backwards so Ford can join in. Can't help wondering what kind of dramatic trials and tribulations a character without Ford's military connections, like, say for example, his father, might have had to go through in order to make the same trip in the same amount of time. Especially since, Director Gareth Edwards' previous film, Monsters, was basically 2.5 hours of just that sort of thing. I don't know the Navy. Most of my family is Air Force, but is Halo training standard for EODs these days? Who cares? It'll look good in the trailers. Ah well. At least none of the human characters are actively annoying, or odious comic relief. Unfortunately, none are distinct enough to leave any positive impressions, playing into the pernicious stereotype that all the human protagonists of kaiju movies are boring. Should anyone tell you this to your face, take heed, for they have outed themselves as a Philistine. Don't bother asking them about original recipe Sarazawa, the brilliant but beleaguered scientist who sacrificed himself to save the world. Don't ask them about Miki and Sin the Snapping Turtle, crusading reporters of the original Mothra, who saved not just the world, but its entire wool supply. Never mind Ichiro and Yuko, crusading reporters from Mothra vs. Godzilla, who saved a literal boatload of kids. Or Yuri Tachibana, crusading reporter from 2001's Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, a giant monster all-out attack, who could teach our boy Ford here a thing or three about dealing with daddy issues. Or Lieutenant Akane, pilot of Mechagodzilla from 2002's Mechagodzilla Remake Squared, who could kick his ass and take his lunch money even without her semi-sentient giant robot. Nothing boring about any of them, but none of their actors will ever grace the cover of Us Weekly. Or Men's Health, as is this case. So only freaks like me will even bother to remember their names. And obviously, no one listens to us. Why do you think it took 15 years to get another Godzilla movie out of Hollywood? And what haven't I talked about yet? Oh yeah, Godzilla. Yes, he's barely in it until an hour in, and you really have to wait until those last 20 minutes before the movie delivers the real goods. Everyone's complaining about that, except for the truly terminal fools, who are waving around a flag with Jaws printed on it like it's their brand new everything-proof shield.
Stop playing with yourself, Hooper. Slow ahead, if you please. You heard him. Slow ahead.
No one seems curious enough to ask, why so little Godzilla in this Godzilla movie?
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
It has nothing to do with Jaws. And not even the craziest mathematician in the world can cook you up a viable formula for when and how much you should show the monster in your monster movie. Sorry, Internet. I hate to shatter your delusions. No, I don't. But there are some things math just cannot tell you. You have to swallow your pride, get over your agoraphobia, and actually utilize experiential knowledge. Or you could just stay home and watch a previous film from the same director. That'd be easier in this case, since there's only one, and it has pretty much all of your answers. Early shots of the monster are almost exclusively from ground level, grounding you, the audience, into this world, save for those few times when they can be distanced from you by being placed inside news footage or the camera on the nose of a cruise missile. And even then, obscuring most of the delicious details behind swirling brick dust, or fog so thick that it might as well take place in Silent Hill. I know. You paid to see Godzilla, not some computer program run a fluid dynamics simulation. But Godzilla is always the most expensive thing in any movie he is in. But fluid dynamics programs are cheap, and the people at Warner Brothers and Legendary, who put up the money for this, wanted to play it cheap. They didn't want to stay alive and ante up.
Be on welfare the whole winter.
On the contrary, Quint, it looks like it's paid off. For damn sure, no one hired Gareth Edwards for this job because of his legendary, rapport with actors. They hired him because he made a $500,000 kaiju film that looks like it cost millions. So now he's gone and made a $160 million kaiju film that looks like it cost $225. And like I said, not bad. The man still has an eye, and there are a brace of good shots in this movie. Godzilla's portrayal here is more or less in line with his mid-90s hero by default period. So, I'm happy. Not as happy as I could have been, but a lot happier than I expected. and the movie as a whole ends up slightly, but surprisingly above average, both as a Godzilla movie and as a soulless, focus-grouped, near-to-death piece of Hollywood product. Do your own math there. Mine says 3 out of 5. And here's hoping we don't have to wait 15 more years before we see the next one.
The arrogance of man is thinking nature is in our control. And not the other way around.